My guest at this time is Family Research Council President Tony Perkins. He is also a commissioner on the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. If you watched coverage of Pastor Andrew Brunson's release from Turkey and his return to the United States, you may well have seen Tony on the plane accompanying the Brunsons. He joins us now to describe what he saw in the past week. And Tony, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
Well, it's such a great story, and so many Americans are rejoicing with you and with the Brunsons at the fact that he is home now. Just so folks know, how did you get connected to the Brunsons and become one of the people who got to accompany him home?
Well, actually, I was in Turkey with the under my commission with the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and so I was there as a commissioner. Went in, of course, I've been advocating for Pastor Brunson for quite some time, but I was appointed to the commission in May as a 9-member commission, and we look at and evaluate religious freedom around the globe. We also have a program where we highlight prisoners of conscience, and Pastor Andrew was one of those. Christine Arriaga had been the commissioner that had handled his case, but they had asked me to go, and so I went, met with him prior to the hearing that was held past Friday, went to the hearing with him, and it was an emotional roller coaster. His greatest fear that he had shared with me on Thursday night was that he would be put back in prison. He's been on house arrest since July, a total of over 2 years and a month. And so at the end, toward the end of the hearing, the prosecutor recommended he be put back in prison and face 35 years. And, of course, that sent really fear, anxiety across the entire courtroom there. And they recessed, came back, and the judges found him guilty of a lesser charge, sentenced him to 3 years, 1 month. He served 2 years, 1 month. That left 1 year left to be done. But they removed the house arrest and the travel ban. And so it was at that point the charge that was there, the highest official representing the State Department, we immediately realized we had to get him out of the country quickly before the verdict might change. It still could be appealed, and so arrangements were made to fly out immediately as soon as a military aircraft could get there. And so I was asked by the White House to accompany him back to the States.
Amazing story, and I'm sure most Americans know the story by now. Pastor Brunson served and ministered in Turkey for decades before being arrested on charges of espionage and terrorism in connection with the failed coup there a couple of years ago. And by all accounts, these are trumped-up accusations. So how did he deal with being falsely accused in a justice system far less reputable than ours?
Well, obviously difficult, but I'm telling you, he's a wonderful man, a godly man who loves Turkey. In fact, said that at the White House when he was with the president on Saturday. He loves the Turkish people. He ministered there for almost 24 years, and he harbors no bitterness, no animosity toward them. Clearly, it was trumped-up charges. As I listened in the courtroom, where two of the witnesses that had been key to the case against him recanted their earlier statements, but their statements were all hearsay. And as a former police officer, the evidence that they used to incarcerate him for 2 years, I couldn't have even gotten a search warrant. It was so flimsy. So he's seeing this, as I think many believers would, asking the question, what does God have for this and for him through this? And God is clearly already using him, but will continue to use him. Just his time of prayer with the president, we actually discussed that on the plane. We had a lot of time on the plane flying. We flew first to Germany, spent a few hours in Germany, and then flew on to the United States. And he wanted to pray for the president. He says, I've been praying for the president. He's prayed for when he was in jail. The jail cell, he was praying for the president, and said, would it be appropriate to pray for him? I said, absolutely. This president would love to have you pray for him. And so he did, and I think that has spoken volumes, not only to this country, but literally around the world, a picture of what true religious freedom really looks like.
That was an amazing moment, and I think struck a lot of people in a powerful way. I just want to walk through the narrative with you, Tony, here in a couple different ways. You mentioned that you got to speak with him before the proceedings in court. What was he like when you saw him once he knew he was headed home? Was it jubilation, mainly relief? What was it like?
Well, we had no idea what might take place, and so the Thursday night where we talked before, in fact, I carried a letter from the president and the vice president to him just as a reminder of our country's commitment to him, because that was his fear, that he'd be put back in prison and forgotten. And so that bolstered him, as well as I took with him from my Family Research Council capacity. We had 16,000 people who signed a pledge to pray for him, and he and his wife Noreen found that very, very encouraging. When there was clarity wasn't there at first on Friday when the verdict was handed down. Nobody really knew exactly what it meant, because there was still this 1 year remaining. But it was kind of like the jail cell door was left open and they just kind of turned away for a moment, kind of. And so that's when there was a very fluid process of trying to line up the transportation, trying to get everything arranged so he could get out of the country. And it was a very tenuous. It's almost like one of the things that you see in the movies. We had no idea what was going to happen. It was changing every 15 minutes, but we just knew we had to get him out of the country while the opportunity was there. It wasn't until we were actually in the air, leaving Izmir, and had crossed out of Turkish airspace that I think he really began to realize that he was free.
And then, of course, many folks saw the images of him landing in Germany and kissing the American flag that the U.S. ambassador presented to him there. It seems like at each step along the way, this started to sink in more and more with him as to what exactly had been done here.
It was a process. I mean, you think about this. I mean, this is a pretty huge transition from facing 35 years in a Turkish prison to sitting in the Oval Office with the President of the United States. I mean, that's a lot of territory to cover in less than 24 hours. So, all of that way trying to just kind of process what was happening, and all of this was not anticipated. I mean, in fact, the State Department, the administration had been working very hard on this. I mean, this was an answer to prayer. God answered our prayers. But we also had a president who himself personally, the vice president, Secretary of State, I have talked to all of them over the last, the many months since they've actually been in office about Pastor Brunson. They've been working it. But we didn't know this was going to be the outcome. There was not a prearranged deal, as some have suggested. The State Department actually had kind of worked up four different scenarios as to what might happen. This actually was not one of the scenarios. We didn't think he would be released immediately with this pending 1 year left on his sentence. So it kind of caught everybody by surprise a little bit, as well as Pastor Brunson. So he's still processing. I actually just talked to him a little bit ago, and he is he's still kind of trying to just realize I'm home, I'm free, and kind of just relax. It has been an intense journey for him.
A couple of quick questions left in our remaining time with Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council. And Tony, you mentioned a couple of times the visit to the White House, and while he was there, Pastor Brunson thanked the Trump administration for its persistent efforts to get him free. I think the exact phrase he said after that was unusually so. And you talked a little bit about the work that the State Department and others have done, but what did he mean by that? What did our government do in this case that was perhaps above and beyond what has been done in other cases?
Well, it may not be above and beyond what this administration has done. I mean, they've brought home about 18 Americans. Mm-hmm. But it is unusual in what we've seen in the past. But I would say that I think the president did take an even greater interest in this, in part because there is such a strong support publicly for Pastor Brunson, the Christian community advocating for him, and this president enjoying a close relationship with them. Probably paid, a lot of attention to that, although, again, I would say this president has sent a really strong message, not only in this case with Pastor Brunson, but others, that, America, he's putting America first in our foreign policy, and this is what it looks like, that we do not sacrifice the well-being of Americans or the human right of religious freedom on the altar of globalism anymore. We will stand up for those things that are essential to the well-being of Americans and to the stability of the world, and that is the religious freedom.
Last question for you, Tony. We talked about the prayer in the Oval Office. We talked a moment ago about his resilience, his faith, trusting that God had a plan even during a very difficult time. What do you hope Americans take away from his example of faith?
Well, first off is the commitment to the gospel, and I think he is just an inspiration. He has no bitterness, no animosity toward the Turkish people. He still wants to pray for the Turkish people. In fact, he's looking forward to someday being able to go back to Turkey and continuing to minister to the people. That's what the gospel is about. And he wants to share that gospel. And I think there's a couple of things. One, we need to realize that religious freedom and the ability to share our faith is always at risk, and we have to defend it, we have to uphold it, we have to protect it, but we also have to use it, and that is we have to share the gospel with as many people as we can, both here in the United States and around the world.
Tony, welcome home to you as well, but especially to Pastor Brunson and his wife, who was, from everything I can tell, a dynamo in helping to get him released as well. So thank you for your time today, and always good to celebrate good news with you. Thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. Great to be with you. Thanks so much.
Tony Perkins is president of the Family Research Council. He's also a commissioner on the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. I'm Greg Corombos reporting for Radio America.